Good afternoon. This is Virginia Rudder. I am the Program Director for Solar United Neighbors of Minnesota. And this is a webinar version of our information session. It is 12 o'clock now. I think we'll wait 1 minute or two to allow for some more people to attend. And then we'll get started in just a few minutes. If you have any questions, there should be a Q&A box that you guys can enter the questions in there. And please let us know if you are having any trouble with the audio. Again, we're just going to get started in a couple minutes, waiting for a couple more people to join. While we're waiting, I've got a couple questions if you guys want to answer. You should see the poll. Well, let's get started. So again, my name is Virginia Rudder. I'm the Program Director for Solar United Neighbors of Minnesota. And today we're walking through the solar information session. So Solar United Neighbors, we are a national nonprofit organization that is a community of people who are working to build a democratic, small d, energy system using rooftop solar. Help people join together, go solar, and fight for their energy rights. And we got started about a decade ago. These two boys, one was a son of our executive director, and at the time they were 12, and they watched An Inconvenient Truth and came home and said, "Mom, we have to go solar." And our executive director thought that that sounded fantastic, but she didn't know anything about it. So they ended up kind of doing a little bit of research. Thought it was going to be pretty challenging. The time in DC where they were living, there were two installers that were telling them different things, and the technology was complicated. The IRS regulations and the permitting and interconnection, all of that stuff was really tough. So those two boys went door to door in their neighborhood and got about 50 neighbors together, and then they supported each other through the process. It took about 2 years, but about 45 of them ended up going solar. And Anya thought that was great, and now we're done. But then she started to get calls from people in other spaces in DC saying, "We heard about this, and we really would like to do it as well." And so our organization grew organically from there. We are now in 9 states, soon to be expanding though, but primarily in the Mid-Atlantic. So you can see a clump over there, and then Florida. And then I currently have my own time zone out here in Minnesota. We are a national organization and work with people all across the country with field staff in 9 states currently. And just a reminder for anyone who's joined, there are questions and answers that you can put up in a box. You should see. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them there throughout the webinar. So we help people across the country go solar in two different ways. One is the solar co-op or bulk purchase group that I'll be talking about today. And then we also have a membership program for one-on-one support with our help desk. And that allows people to work on their own timeline. And it's a great opportunity for people who are outside of our solar co-op. Today's presentation, I will walk through in three parts, and we'll stop. First, we'll walk through the technology of solar, and then how our process works at Solar United Neighbors, and then lastly, the economics of solar. First, the technology. So when we are talking about solar with Solar United Neighbors, we are talking about solar photovoltaic, or PV, which is creating electricity from the solar energy. There's also solar thermal, which creates hot water, and solar heat. And we tend to work with solar PV primarily, but if you are interested in the other technologies, just let us know. Installers who do that work in Minnesota. The PV panels are created from a bunch of cells, and so you can see those little rectangular pieces. Those are the cells. Those are joined together into a panel or a module, and then you put a bunch of panels together to form an array. You also will have two other pieces of technology with your entire system. So you'll have a racking system that will hold the panels either to your roof or up on the ground, and then an inverter. And the inverter changes the electricity that the panels create in direct current, or DC, into AC, alternating current, which is what we use in our home. Some other terminology to keep in mind is that solar panels are sized in kilowatts. So your array is going to be sized in like the kilowatts, or the capacity. So it's the system size. And then the electricity production are the kilowatt hours. So that's the electricity that it produces over time. We tend to see an average kilowatt size of about 7 kilowatts throughout our Solar United Neighbors participants. In Minnesota, I think that size has ranged. So the smallest that I think we've had is about 3 kilowatts, and the largest right now is a 22 kilowatt system for an organic farm. So you can kind of have anything in between, and the sizing you will choose based on your electricity usage and your budget, and then the space that you have for that system. So, if you have a big open field next to your home, you can have a larger system. If you have a small roof, then that can constrain the size of your system. And then, speaking of rooftops, the solar connects to your roof in a variety of ways. So here you can see the racking down by their feet, and that is a direct connection to the roofing. It uses some bolts that penetrate the roof with flashing around to ensure that there's no water damage in the home. Here's a flat roof that has the racking kind of laid across. And then, there's just all kinds of racking systems too. So, and you can see here that the panels are pretty close to the roof. So there's not a lot of space in between, and that's really great. It doesn't allow for a lot of wind pressure on the roof, and it's not like a big bulky thing. And all installations with roofing use a residential building contractor. And so like you know that the roofing penetrations will be done well and not have any leaking. For the connection to your home, it's generally pretty straightforward, and the electrical box shouldn't need an upgrade. If you have an older home with older wiring, you may need to upgrade your electrical box, or if your box is already full. But the installer will be able to help you understand that and look at your connections and ensure that they will work with the solar array. And all solar installations in Minnesota are installed by a licensed electrician. And so again, you'll know that the connections are done well and safely for your home and the grid. So one of the things that we also encourage everyone to consider is whether your space is good for solar. And this is something that we help all participants of our solar co-ops look at. We will do a roof assessment for you as part of the service. And what we are looking at is the orientation of your home. And so if your roof is facing somewhat south, it doesn't have to be entirely south. You can see there's good spaces if you go west and also east. Anything north, you're just not going to get enough sun to produce enough electricity to really make it worthwhile. We look for shading, and ideally you would have no shading, but trees will, the shading on the panels will obviously impact the production. And so if you have a little bit, then that's fine. If you have a lot, then it again will decrease the amount of electricity your panels are producing. And then we're looking for enough space for the panels. So at Solar United Neighbors, we tend to look for something around 200 square feet. That will give you about a 2 kilowatt system, which we've seen as the smallest that installers are usually interested in installing. And we're looking for a smooth roof span, something that doesn't have a lot of venting or gables or that kind of thing, so that you can put the panels there. So then if we connect it all together, you have the sun shining down on your panels on the roof, and those will then create electricity. And that will go through the wires into the solar inverter, which then will turn that DC electricity into AC that you then will use in your home. So if you're home and running a washing machine or watching TV, you will use that electricity right then. And if you're out at work, that electricity will go out through your meter onto the grid for your neighbors to use. And you will get credit for that electricity through a policy called net metering. So net metering allows electricity to flow from your home and also to your home. And then you will have a bill credit for anything that you send out to the grid. So your electricity bill will be your total electricity used less the amount that you produced. And if you have a month where you are producing more than you are using, then you'll have a credit that will roll over. All utilities in the state of Minnesota are required to have net metering available to their customers. And the bill credit rate varies depending on utility. So the investor-owned utilities such as Xcel Energy have generally a rate that's the same as what you are paying. And some of the rural electric cooperatives have set it up with a different structure. So I am happy to help anyone who wants to kind of dig deeper into their bills to understand that. So say you get solar and you have it all, and sunny day, but the grid is down because it's Minnesota and we had, a snowstorm or something that knocked down our power lines. Unfortunately, the solar panels, even if they are producing electricity, will be turned off if the grid is down. And that is to keep everybody who is working on the grid and those lines safe so that they know where all of the voltage is. So if you would like to have power during a grid outage, then you need a battery system. And generally, you want to think about this if you deal with a lot of utility outages or if you have some critical loads like a sump pump or a well pump or medical equipment that really make it necessary for you to have power all the time. Here we have two different chemistries. So the lead acid is the one on the left. That's just your basic car battery. And the lithium ion is on the right. That's like the LG Chem or the Tesla Powerwall that you may have heard of. And energy storage right now is a little bit more expensive. So one of the things that you want to think about are the loads that you really want to run. So we have an example here for a family who really wants to ensure that their refrigerator is running when the power is out and their Wi-Fi, but not their stove. So just kind of helping you think through the critical loads and what you really want to power. And that's because batteries right now are expensive. So you kind of, to fit your budget, are looking at the loads that you really want to ensure are continuing to run. And we have a really fantastic battery storage guide. So if this is something that you'd like to learn more about, I encourage you to go to our website, solarunitedneighbors.org/storage, and check that guide out. It walks through all of the chemistries, how do you think through those critical loads, and I think it's a really fantastic resource for storage. When you're thinking about the technology, some of the frequently asked questions that we get are, what are the warranties? So all of the equipment that you will purchase for your array will be warranted. Solar panels themselves are warranted for 25 years and provide a production guarantee so that in year 25, they will be producing at least 80% of the electricity they produced on day one. So the silicone inside the panels slowly degrades over time, and so it starts to produce less electricity than initially. But in 25 years, you're guaranteed to have at least 80% of that electricity. So we tend to think that 80% is still pretty great, and that means that these solar panels should last longer than 25 years. My father-in-law has some solar panels on his home that are about 35 years old, and the solar cells are a lot larger than they are now, since technology has improved in that time frame, but they're still producing electricity. The inverters also have warranties. Those range from 12 to 25 years, and most of the 12-year warranties you can extend to 25, and so that will match the panels themselves. And then the labor warranties in Minnesota range from like 2 to 10 years. It depends on the installer. And the warranty will cover the roof penetrations as well as all of the labor on the wiring and the connections. We have generally found that it does not installing solar does not increase your homeowner's insurance policy, but we do recommend you talk with your insurance provider and make sure that they know, one, that you are installing the solar, and two, to check your homeowner limited liability coverage. All of the utilities in Minnesota require that you have $300,000 of liability insurance, and that's generally something that's included in your homeowner's policy, but you just kind of want to check what your coverage level is. Solar arrays don't really have any maintenance. There's no moving parts, and so it's a pretty straightforward installation or investment after it is installed. The snow cover will definitely impact your production, and so some people like to clear the snow off of the panels. We recommend you use a soft brush, and then we don't recommend you get up on your roof. So if you have a ground mount system that's easier to clear, some people I've talked to use those telescoping brushes that car dealerships will use to clear the snow off of the panels. And so, sometimes they'll just do what they can from their deck and then leave the rest. But the nice thing about the solar panels is that they're black. And so once they start to get a little bit of electricity production, a little bit of clearing, they heat up, and then the rest of the snow will shed. And so I think most people in Minnesota see a decrease in electricity production for about 3 to 8 days, depending on the snow. And so it's a smaller impact. And the cash flow and production predictions and the information you get from the installer will include some decrease for the winter for snow, and also just the change in light that we receive. The roof it doesn't need to be new. We recommend you have at least 10 years of useful life left in your roof before you install solar on top of it. You can remove the panels and put them, take them off the roof, put a new roof back on, and then put the panels back on. That tends to add a couple $1,000s of cost just because of the labor to take them off and put them back on. But that's definitely an option. And systems last at least 25 years, as I had said. And then for hail, the panels are rated to withstand a hail impact of 1 inch in diameter up to 50 miles an hour. So they're very durable. I have one installer say that you can kick it with the toe of a steel-toed boot and it won't crack. And then that other question is about a homeowners association. Sometimes there are restrictions on putting solar on your home, and I'm happy to help work through any of those issues if you are facing that with your association. So I'll take a minute here to see if there are any other questions on the technology. And again, if you click in the Zoom, you should be able to see the Q&A box. All right, great. So now we'll walk through how our process works here at Solar United Neighbors. One of the things that I really like about our solar co-op process is that it is bringing communities together to allow solar enthusiasts and advocates to connect, be part of this growing solar movement here in Minnesota and across the country. Our process also allows for participants to get a really great value on the installation work from us at Solar United Neighbors and also the other community members throughout the process. Here is our timeline for the solar co-op, and for the Iron Range co-op, we're sort of in this month 1 through 2. So I've conducted an in-person info session in Mountain Iron on October 16th. And today we're doing this webinar version, and we have invited people to join the group online, and we're working to grow the group further. When you join the solar co-op, it's free, and there's no obligation for you to go solar. The goal of Solar United Neighbors is to help everybody feel confident in the technology, kind of understand what it is, and then also to allow you to explore whether this is the right investment for you. So as I had said, we'll do a rooftop assessment to help you decide whether the space you were thinking for solar is really a good fit. And then we also ask when you sign up for the aspects of an installer that are most important to you. So whether that's the installer experience, whether they're local to the area, the equipment quality, price. So we ask you to consider those different criteria. And then when we get the group to be about 20 to 30 people, then we will start a competitive bid process to select an installer. And so we take those criteria that you had selected and use that information, and then we send out a public request to installers all throughout the state. I think we have 28 on our list right now. And we also send it to the State Trade Association. And we ask them to give us their best price for the group. And we tell them, we have this many people in this area of Minnesota, and they will send us answers to a lot of questions. So we'll ask them to give us the panels, all of the equipment, their pricing, if you want to have really high efficiency panels, or if you want to have ones that are made in America or even made in Minnesota, now that we have Helion up on Mountain Iron. And we'll ask them about their experience in that area of Minnesota with solar in general. We ask them, for references and lots of different questions. And then I and my team kind of go through all of those bids, and I will call the references. We check their licenses with the state of Minnesota. And we take all this information and we put it into a bid spreadsheet. And then we invite any participants to join a selection committee. And this is comprised only of participants, and you don't have to have any knowledge of solar, just kind of a desire to dig into the bids and understand what's involved. And then I am there to kind of answer everybody's questions, but the committee chooses one installer for the group. So, and I do not vote. Solar United Neighbors is installer neutral. And again, we're trying to give the group confidence and lots of information to make a really solid choice, but we don't choose the installer. And those criteria that all participants had selected, we use for the selection committees. So we'll say, 19 of 25 really care about price, but 22 cared about equipment quality. And so maybe then an installer who had more high efficiency panels would be chosen over one who had a lower price. So the lowest price bid is not always the one that is chosen by the group. They're looking for the best value for all participants in the group, so kind of weighing the different criteria that are important to group participants and ensuring that we try to find an option that works for the bulk of the group. So once the participants choose the installer, then we'll have a sign-up deadline, and this allows for there still to be some time for more people to get this great deal and support to go solar, but that we don't have it open forever, so the installer knows that the pricing that they bid is still good. There's a lot of changes in solar markets right now, especially with new manufacturers and some changes in that space. And so we want to make sure that they have that ability to know their pricing. And they will set up a site visit with each participant after they're selected. And that's when they'll come out and they'll look at your roof. And so they'll do a really detailed assessment of whether it's a great space for solar. They'll look at your structure to make sure that your roof can support the solar. They'll look at your your electric system within the home, and make sure you don't need any upgrades. And then they'll also look at your utility bills. So most people like to size their electric or their PV system to be about 100% of their usage, and that will then have your electric bills kind of go away. But you can size it as small as 25% of your electricity usage up to generally 120% in Minnesota. And that sort of depends on the utility territory and their rules on interconnection. And again, I'm happy to help anyone who wants to kind of understand what the specifics are for your space. But you'll get a tailored proposal that's for your roof, your electric usage, and your budget, but it'll be based on the group price. And then you have about a month to consider whether you want to sign. And that's kind of your go, no-go point. So everything up to this point is free and entirely voluntary, no obligation to buy anything. And then once you sign that contract, then you're entering into an agreement with that installer. Solar United Neighbors is not a party of that contract. It's a bilateral agreement between you and the installer, but I will still be there. So if you have questions about the contract or have any problems with the installer, we're still there as an advocate for you. We do charge installers $600 per signed contract, and that is a discounted customer acquisition fee, basically. Our national research has shown that installers often spend somewhere between $1,000 and $3,000 to get each residential customer. And so installers have been really excited to work with us all across Minnesota on these groups and have said that they love working with our program because customers know something about solar, they're educated, and then they're also really excited to move forward. And so installers have really short sales calls and think that it's a really great deal. So those savings then are also passed on to participants through our process. So once all the contracts are signed, then the installer will order the equipment, file any necessary permits with the local authorities, work with your utility to do the interconnection, and then start to install those arrays. And then at the very end, we'll have a party to celebrate all of the solar that we've built in the community and the success. And again, we just really want to reiterate that Solar United Neighbors is neutral, and the co-op participants are the one who chooses the installer. And again, it is on a variety of equipment, not just price. So we're looking for the best value for the participants. So I'll pause here if there are any questions on our solar co-op process. All right, great. So next we're going to talk about the economics of solar. So when you're thinking about solar, one of the first things to consider is you want to think about it in price per watt. The reason for this is that panels have different wattages. Some will be 270 watts, some will be 300 watts, and then there's different efficiencies and aspects. So the easiest way to compare apples to apples is to get it down to the per watt price. So we have an example here, $12,000 with a 3 kilowatt system is $4 per watt. And that pricing is including everything. So it's your panels, your inverter, the racking system, it's also the permits and the interconnection, all of the labor, everything. And so I think that's another good thing to consider if you are looking at doing your own install. or we're looking at panels online, the pricing would be very different than this turnkey pricing for the entire system. You also want to think about solar as a long-term investment. So this is something you'll have at least for 25 years. And so, thinking about that as a long-term project. And you want to look at your utility rate, both what it is now and kind of where it's going to go over that 25-year time frame. In Minnesota, we tend to see a 10 to 12-year payback, which means that your electricity production savings that you will see on your electric bill will pay for the upfront cost of your solar array in about 10 to 12 years. And this will vary, again, by the utility territory that you're in. Some incentives will decrease that payback, but I think a 10-year average is what we've been seeing. This is, I think, a kind of crazy graph. It's looking at the pricing of solar from the 70s all the way down to 2013, and the dramatic decreases that it has seen. A lot of this has been from technology advances and improvements in manufacturing. And so we're just not seeing this kind of decline anymore. I think we've reached the sort of the bottom of this bell curve. But it's still, I think, a nice aspect to have support through the process, whether it's with us or another kind of agency that does a similar educational campaign. So here's a sample cash flow, and this is with conservative pricing. We had built this up a year ago before we had seen a lot of. I think I would say now the average is a little bit lower, maybe 350 or so. But for comparison value, we've shown both a 4 kilowatt system and an 8 kilowatt system. Obviously, you could have anything, down from 2 all the way up to 40. So that sizing varies. So for our example, we have a $15,000 cost for this 4 kilowatt system at $375 a watt. And then you will receive a 30% federal tax credit. This is a credit that you take on taxes. It's not a deduction. And if you don't have a $4,500 tax liability, you can carry that over. So say, for example, your taxes owed were only $1,500, then you can take that $4,500 for the next 3 years. So that will bring your net cost down to $10,500. And then here we've shown an estimated lifetime savings of $23,500 for a net profit of $13,000. And this is using, you can see down at the bottom, a 2% electricity price increase per year, which I think is pretty reasonable for Minnesota. And then showing some degradation and the yearly production. In Minnesota, there are a variety of financing options out there for you. So installers sometimes will offer financing, and there are a variety of banks and credit unions, and these are offering both solar loans and also home equity lines of credit. And then the Center for Energy and the Environment is a nonprofit based in the Twin Cities that offers solar financing all throughout the state. And the Minnesota Housing Finance Authority also offers fix-up loans, which you can use for solar. So there's a lot of different options. Third-party ownership is sort of that Solar City or Sunrun model, and that's where someone else owns the solar and either rents your roof or sets up a power purchase agreement. And we don't have those in Minnesota for residential. So you would, if you're looking at solar, you're looking at financing to own or just paying upfront. And here we've got a graph that shows your cumulative savings over the 25-year lifespan. And the dark blue is a cash purchase. And so you can see, the really big divot and then the 30% federal tax credit. And then we've got light blue is the 10-year loan, and then the white or really light is the 15-year loan. So obviously, if you are able to pay in cash, you'll see more savings over the lifespan because you're not paying any interest. But I think it's generally a great investment, and it gives you a good payback over time. So any questions on the financing side? I don't know if we have any Minnesota Power customers on the line today, but there is an incentive that Minnesota Power offers, which is in addition to the metering arrangement that we talked about before. You can size your solar up to 120% of your annual usage, and then they will give you a rebate check that's based on the annual production. So they use some modeling software to determine kind of how much electricity they think your system will pay or will create in a year. And then they pay you 83 cents per kilowatt hour as a check. So for this example here, an 8 kilowatt system, you get $7,366. So if anyone on here is a Minnesota Power customer, that's a great incentive offering. Any questions on economics? All right, great. I'm going to go back now to the last few slides. So I invite everyone to go to our website, solarunitedneighbors.org/Minnesota. We have a lot of great resources there. We'll have a copy of this webinar. And there's also information, like we have the battery storage guide that I referenced. We have a Go Solar guide, new guide on how to sell your solar home and talking through kind of the benefits that solar provides and how to use that asset to market your home to new buyers. And if you're interested, I'd invite you to go to the Iron Range Solar Co-op site, so solarunitedneighbors.org/Iron Range, and join. Again, joining is free, entirely voluntary, and myself and my colleague Ian will look at your roof and give you a good assessment on that or your space near your home if you're interested in ground mount, just to give you a good idea if solar is the right fit for you. And our Iron Range group right now, I think, is about 10 participants. So we're looking for some more to get to that time where we will start that competitive bid process. And so I'd love for everyone to share the group with anyone in the area who is interested in solar. And then I'd also invite you, on our website, you can find our listserv, which is a public email conversation space for solar. So we've got a bunch of solar homeowners who are on there and talk about any questions they have about their system. We've got some people who work in solar policy at the state. We talk about meetings or webinars that are happening. Some electric vehicle people. And so I think it's just a great space. You can ask questions of other homeowners or installers who are on there. And it's not a space for sales. So no installers are going to be pushing any equipment on you or anything, but it's a great resource for any questions on solar. Here's what our website looks like. You can see got issues, so like learn the general issues, how you can get involved with us, news, and all those kinds of resources available. Thank you very much. I'll leave this open if anyone has any more questions. Otherwise, feel free to email us at mnteam@solarunitedneighbors.org.